Welcome to another episode of the Business of AI podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Greg Freeman today from the Data and AI Literacy Academy. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Tim. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Let's find out a bit more about you before we get started. So can you tell us a bit about your background and how you ended up setting up the Data and AI Literacy Academy?
Yeah, absolutely. So founded the business nearly 4 years ago now, really when data literacy was becoming a major challenge for large organizations. And what it came down to was my background was actually as a commercial leader. So I ran kind of revenue, marketing, customer teams. And I started to see the value of data and how it could help us to make decisions, and how actually if my team were better enabled, then we'd be better as a whole. We'd understand the business better. We'd understand our customers better. But when I came to find some way of taking them on that journey, it wasn't really possible. And I was in a very, very data literate business at that point. So pretty much everybody else in the organization actually was a data professional or from a data background. And it kind of blew my mind that none of these people who were data professionals could really communicate to me, what do we as business people need to know about data in order to make it valuable? It always came back to the tools, the software, how to do coding better in Excel or in the database. And I was like, but I don't think that's really what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is something that helps me to understand, how do I apply this to the job I do? And that was clearly a barrier. And then the business has gone from strength to strength in that time. So we work with some unbelievable organizations. Bentley Motors were our first ever enterprise client. SSE, the big energy company, followed quite close after. But now we have large programs across the Ministry of Defence, across BAE Systems, like Barclays, name a logo, and we may well be working with them. And then clearly in the last 12 months, the AI literacy, the speed of technological change in that area has really become a major element of what we do. And every program we now set up is either entirely AI, which I'm a little bit against, because I do believe there's a significant need for data literacy to be the foundation of AI literacy and AI readiness, or there's a really nice combination between data and AI literacy. But there is certainly not a program now that doesn't involve the AI literacy lens.
This is great. So I love all of this, and thank you for the work you're doing, because one of the things that we often call for is greater confidence across the workforce with being able to use AI. And I think that comes down to the entry level, I mean, at all levels, but just having that familiarity, that literacy to be able to have the confidence. So I wanted to just drill into that a little bit more, because you're really at the cutting edge here. What do you mean by literacy? Because I also hear the words things like numeracy or digital skills. So can you help us kind of understand, how all those terms fit together? Are they the same thing? And what do you mean by literacy?
Great question. I think I'll start with what we don't mean by literacy. So we don't mean, when we talk about data and AI literacy, simply kind of tool competency or software competency. And I think that's a really big misnomer within the space, that actually all we want from our people to be data and AI literate is them to be better at the tools. And therefore, a lot of large, over time, Power BI training programs have gone on, or now large Copilot training programs go on. And for us, that just misses the point in a lot of ways. It's not to say that those are not really important facets of using the tool, and we would describe it as buttonology. Like, if all you teach people is buttonology, you really miss the challenge that most of them face. And what we mean by literacy is, how do people feel confident enough to use data in their job? How do they trust it enough? And do they have the right mindset? So one of the things that is a massive problem when it comes to data and AI adoption is, do people wake up tomorrow and think about how to solve their problems differently? Because if you wake up today and think, I'm going to hire another person, or I'm going to spin up a program team, or maybe we could add something more onto that project they're already running. Actually, you're not thinking about how do we re-engage the way we think about that problem. And a major part of literacy is waking up the next day or the day after that and thinking, the problems that I've got in the business, could we solve them in a different way? And you could have all the technical skills in the world, but if you don't wake up and think, actually, how do I use data and AI to change the way I do this, then you're not going to be literate. And again, a lot of that is the foundation of confidence, mindset, like thinking about processes differently, thinking about the way that systems interact differently. And a lot of it is actually getting your head out of your own kind of like the sand of your day job and thinking there's stuff going on upstream of me, downstream of me. How do we create a collaborative culture, a culture where you can make mistakes and experimentation's fine? And all those things really are what is the root of a good enterprise data and AI culture. It definitely isn't just about getting more people knowing how to press the buttons on Power BI or on Tableau or on Copilot. So I think that's probably how we'd view it. Much more around the surrounding mindset and behaviors, much less only about the technology skills, because they're obviously important. We do teach those too, but you need the rest to make it really impactful.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's very aligned with how we view things as well. I think the other big change that I'm seeing now is that people are often people who don't use AI, like in quotation marks, who maybe haven't yet played around or a bit nervous about it. They see it as being a technology which is a bit like learning Excel, and you remember, so going back, everyone thinks back to, when I learned Excel, I didn't know how to use it. And then it was really dry and I had to go on these courses and learn all these different things and formulas and lookups and blah, blah, blah. And that's the mental memory that people have of learning a thing. And actually the amazing way in which LLMs are now is that you can just talk to them. So you don't actually have to go through that same learning process. So to your point, if you've managed to create that mindset in the organization where people are willing to experiment, where they're willing to play, they're curious, then that's going to enable them much more for that opportunity to really get their hands on those LLMs and play around with them. Whereas if they haven't got that mindset, they're still going to be arms crossed, leaning back, being a bit fearful about how to learn the next Excel, right?
100%. I think so much of it is about teaching first principles rather than teaching the technology itself. And the reality is actually technology within the AI space is moving so rapidly that you could have built a buttonology course 8 weeks ago and you'd probably have to build it again today because it's so different. Like, I mean, most of the enterprise world is very much Copilot focused, and that isn't moving quite as fast as, say, a Claude or a ChatGPT OpenAI. But genuinely, Claude has released so much functionality in the last 8 weeks that you'd need to restart. Whereas actually, if what you build is the first principles for people of how do I understand like what this layer means for my work, how do I think about actually like that problem being different, and therefore how do I feel comfortable to test out the new buttons or test out the new functionality rather than needing somebody to kind of walk me through it every time. Actually getting down to those first principles is the thing that's going to allow you to have a workforce that can really embrace the speed of change, not just having been taught the buttons once and getting started from there. So yeah, I think it really is about rethinking the way you educate the workforce in this space, because it's the only way to realistically allow them to keep up with the pace of change.
Yeah. And you talk about the pace of change in particular. It made me think about the guys on YouTube, right? I mean, I watch a lot of the YouTube videos on the latest Claude developments, but it literally is every week they're having to publish a new update because the buttons, to use your language, have changed. And I feel slightly sorry for them, right? Because their business is being a YouTube influencer or whatever. And they used to be able to put these videos up and get hundreds of thousands of kind of views, but now they're having to publish a new one. It's a lot more work for them. But anyway, that's just a side note. Going back to what you were talking about, though, in terms of those first principles, what is the difference between how you teach that to the leaders of an organization versus the everyday employees? Is it the same type of methodology, the same type of literacy, or do you have to sort of teach different things?
I think it is different in the same way as really the way that data literacy and data technology should have been taught, it is different. If your job isn't to do the do every day, then you're probably going to find less opportunities to actually like use technical skills in the first place, right? If you're a frontline worker and you've got processes that you're in charge of and you have to deliver them manually today, and you learn some new skills, and then you can automate them, or you can streamline them, then that is the type of work that somebody who is a frontline worker, knowledge worker doing the do probably does on a daily basis. Most leaders don't do the do now, so why would they do the do if they had AI? Is the way that I think about it. What they need to be able to do is make sure that them, again, I'm going to use the word mindset, but their mindset, the way they role model the types of thinking that need to be considered by their teams. And I guess we had a really nice stage talk the other day at SXSW, and I think the thing that really came across from that was leaders are still blocking the progression of their teams and the progression of their processes quite a lot more than actually not having the abilities within those teams to implement a change. And if we can't get leaders to think differently, and I've said this fairly abrupt phrase quite often recently, people need to burn their processes down and rebuild them with AI in mind. You can't just layer up AI on top of current processes and think, right, we've solved the AI thing. This is a totally different way of implementing process, implementing workflows, and you can cut out so many steps by doing so. That isn't to say you need to cut out people, but you cut out so many steps if you don't just take the 25-step process and put AI in to make it streamlined. Actually, that 25-step process could well be a 10-step process in the new world. What that means is that a lot of leaders have got to accept that their little kingdom or their chiefdom of like people and process is going to look different, and they're going to have to be less protective of it. They're going to have to be more willing to understand how they themselves need to participate in rethinking those processes. And then most of all, they need to allow it to happen and be able to create that change off the back of it. And that's why with leaders, we do far less of the kind of here's how you do the do, and much more of open-mindedness, critical thinking about your processes, process and system redesign thinking, behavioural science, and how do you actually implement change and influence change within your people so that they want to adopt it and they want to think differently. That's really what good leadership, data and AI literacy looks like these days. It isn't about teaching them all the same stuff you teach your frontline workers.
Yeah. I love that phrase, burn it down. And it was good. We had a bit of this conversation on the South by Southwest stage a couple of weeks ago. That concept of burning it down there, I mean, it's a powerful way to visualize things. And we're getting into talking around sort of the transformation of an organization now. So the transformation process, we've been talking about transformation in business for 15, 20 years, right? And the companies that we see that have gone through that transformation process they're able to cope with AI because they've built in that mindset, they've built in that literacy already, but they're very much in the minority of companies. So what sort of appetite do you see when you go into some of these organizations who maybe haven't gone through that transformation, and you go, hey guys, we're going to have to burn everything down? And what's the response that you get from those leaders and also the mid managers? Because I expect that just the human behavior is they're not going to immediately embrace it.
It's not always the most popular concept, no. You can't get away from the fact that it's a tough challenge to get people to think that way and to think differently about the way they've worked for so long. Ego can often be part of it. Pride can often be part of it. Their own fear, actually, as management and leadership can be part of it. If you don't fully understand what the change is going to look like, then you're probably not going to run headfirst at it. And I think that, again, is one of the things that we've really got to unlock, because I'm very, very aware that right now, it would be career suicide to sit in an upper echelon of a business and say that data and AI are not going to be impactful and are not going to create change. Nobody's really going to do that. But when you properly get into the weeds of it with people in the leadership team and the exec team, of do they really understand what the change looks like, what it needs to look like, what will be different after, the impact it's going to have, the measurability of that impact. Actually, you find that a lot of it is lip service, and lip service is fine because you've got to be part of speaking the right message. But in truth, they're not going to fully be able to champion something if they don't really understand it. And therefore, you've got to unlock that blocker with them. And it's one of the hardest things to do. And not everybody jumps on it. I mean, we call it the frozen middle. So that's your kind of C-2, C-3, C-4, who really are the connectivity into the wider body of the people. If they don't buy into this, it's going to be really difficult to implement that change in the way you want to. So, yeah, I mean, most of our early programs now start with a really impactful mindset and behavior change for not only the executives, but those C-1, C-2, C-3, etc. Because it's the key unlock.
Just help us understand what you mean by the C's there. That's a methodology.
Yeah, so C-suite being the top executives within the business, then the layers below them, so the 1 layer down from them, 2 layer down from them, 3 layer down from them. Typically, the way it's talked about enterprise is that kind of C-suite -1 layer, C-suite -2 layers, C-suite -3 layers. So yeah, the people that run the people, I guess, is what we're talking about there. And that frozen middle tends to be the people that run the people. And that's what we've really got to unlock. It's actually, Tim, why so much of this, and something that's been a key piece of our message since day dot with data and AI literacy, is this isn't really a training problem. We wish it was, because it would make our lives so much easier. But if the assumption is made that everybody is going to want to learn this, you are going to fail massively. This is as much, if not more, a change management, internal comms, winning hearts and minds process, which almost gives you the permission to deliver the education and the training, as it is just an L&D training process. So I think it's really important that we see this as a change program, a meaningful change in an internal comms program, not just give some people some training and hope it lands.
Well, that's really important to make that distinction, because you're right that training is something that probably everyone has experienced as a course, right? Whereas change management is more of a system-wide, organization-wide process to deliver the mindset and the culture that we've been talking about. But how do you actually get the individuals to care? Because, you know, we've talked a little bit about the leaders, and there's less of them, and, you know, they're more motivated to get on board and to drive changes. And then that middle management, the -1s and the -2s that you mentioned, I can understand how you get them on board. But the broad organization, particularly in some of these larger organizations you're dealing with, presumably there's pockets of people who just don't care. How do you engage them? Because we're getting really into the human psychology almost here now, aren't we?
Yeah, that's where the behavioural science comes in. I think what we observe is that organisations are fairly good at designing what we would describe as kind of structural change programs. So there's lots of models for that over time. We've seen those be designed well within organisations. What they tend, so that's like the analogy I would give is the kind of structural change program at an enterprise level is, if you were designing a town, it's where the roads go, it's where the hospital goes. It's like where do the bits go in terms of like setting the structure for the change is that bit. The bit they then forget is that the human beings move into that city and they decide that they want to go the wrong way down a one-way street, or they don't like where the bus stop is, so they complain about it, or they paint their house a different colour, which was never supposed to be painted. And really, the bit of change that people forget about at enterprise tends to be, how do we actually influence those individuals, which moves really below that structural change layer and goes into this behavioural science layer. So we think a lot about the types of interventions, whether it's differences in kind of incentivization or differences in kind of key messaging. What do we encourage from a behaviors perspective? What do we restrict entirely? So a good way of restricting somebody from using a tool is not to tell them not to, it's to just shut that tool off if you don't want them to be using it. Like, there's all those different like behavioral science layers that you've really got to think about in order for people to meaningfully change their habits, and it's got to be very much within their environment as well. So if they go to a one-off training course and nothing has changed when they get back to their desk in the environment around them or the way that the model operates, etc., then it isn't going to land. And I say this as somebody who genuinely owns a training business. That is what most people would describe as. What is Data and AI Literacy Academy? It's an educational training business. Training alone is not the solution to this problem. Software alone is not the solution to this problem. It is the wrapper that goes around it all, which influences what people should do and shouldn't do, want to do and don't want to do, and most importantly, can and can't do when they get back to their desk the day after that, the day after that, and the day after that. And there's so many things that go into that, different types of comms packages, different events that we run, different ways that we readjust kind of hiring practices and those types of things. Those are all elements of actually making that work within the environment that they operate in.
And it sounds like it's not a once and done process, right? I mean, in the old days, thinking way back to that Excel learning example I gave, you'd go up, you do your Excel course level 1 or whatever, and then you might not go back for another 6 months, and then you do your level 2. But what you're talking about is a dynamic, ongoing, engaging process that needs to be constantly updated, not just because of the skills which are changing all the time, but also to keep that mindset engaged and keep the people engaged in that transformation.
100%. I mean, there's a concept, there's an educational theory. So the theory of education is called pedagogy, which is the kind of proper name for it. And there's a pedagogical concept called spaced practice or spaced learning. And spaced practice is the idea that things have to happen repeatedly over time so that you can kind of build on top of messages people have heard before, build on top of learnings people have heard before. And it's actually that spacing that gives them the time to go back to their job, work out where they've got gaps and how what they've just learned applies to those, and when they build on top of it, it actually lands with them. So just like anything, if you do it as a one-off, just get everybody in a room for a morning, is anything, and I think people look back on their own experiences of that. Like, they could have been to the best training program in the world that took a morning, and for that morning they were engrossed, they were engaged, they went away from it at lunch and thought, this is the best thing I've ever heard. But how much have they actually done with it? Because it's not been reinforced over time. So you're not going to achieve cultural change in a single morning or in 4 weeks or anything like that. I think we'll often say to businesses, and I have said this to some of the biggest businesses in the world, if you are seeing this as a one-off engagement, then we are not the partner for you. Go and find a consultant who'll do some training for you. That's absolutely fine. We're not against you doing that. But for this to work, you need to view it as a cultural shift that the business and the people are going on over and over again for the next X amount of years until you've actually achieved a data and AI culture. And culture just doesn't change overnight. I mean, like, there's no evidence of any world where culture changes in a split second. So yeah, for us, it's got to be viewed as this is a multi-year partnership. This is a multi-year approach to changing the data and AI culture within the business, which then results in better adoption of technology, better adoption of AI, better rebuilding of processes, better conversations and decision-making with data. All those things are outcomes, but not outcomes that you can achieve in 6 months or 12 months. It's going to be a multi-year kind of like approach to changing that culture.
Yeah, it's really important to hear the scale at which this change is going to happen, because I think that's the other sort of misconception that often you'll hear at the C-suite level, is that things can be done very quickly because they're hearing that the technology is changing very quickly and they're hearing the technology is very powerful. So they think, just let's get AI now, sort of thing. But actually what you pointed to is that, again, the good thing about this is that it is a human-led challenge, but the challenge with humans is that they take time precisely as you're outlining there,
Exactly.
to adopt that technology. Let's talk a bit about sort of AI though as well, because one of the areas where people are nervous about AI is that it's going to take jobs, it's going to replace them. And I wanted to get your perspective on how what you're hearing, both from the organizations, but also from the employees that you're interacting with, about whether this is more focused on empowering versus replacing people in those organizations.
Yeah, I think there are two lenses, like you say, on this. The first is that organizations are sometimes inappropriately excited about the idea of AI replacing people, but actually the businesses that we see that have done this, and I think again this came up at South by Southwest, by the time you've probably replaced some manual low salaried workers with AI, which doesn't run for free, and there's some huge bills that I'm starting to hear about for kind of tokenization and even just the electrics that's involved in running it. And if you've got your own data center, the kind of fresh water that's required, which we all know about as a potential problem at the moment, like that cost isn't cost zero. On top of that, what does AI take? What do really complex AI processes take? They take a lot of smart people to run them. So maybe you've replaced 10 low-paid people with 2 high-paid people, and that again isn't a huge offset. Then you've got obviously the added risk, which businesses are really aware of, and the thing that we keep repeating is we know that all the news about the EU AI Act says that stuff has been pushed down the road a little bit. They've given people more flexibility. The bit that hasn't changed actually is that since early last year, the requirement to train your people in this space and educate your people in this space has existed, and it's been persistent. You can't, and it has to be effective, high quality education. It can't just be your tick box compliance education. It has to be job role specific. They have to understand it in the context of the world they operate in, all those types of things. So that excitement definitely exists with businesses. I prefer the ones that are thinking of it as an enabler, if I'm honest, rather than a replacer, because I think the bottom line impact isn't going to be as stark as people think by replacing humans. I think there's as I've said there, costs that you'll pick up off the back of that lessen that impact. What it does do though, and what AI should be viewed as, is something that is going to improve the way we do business, is going to improve the results we get and how quickly we can get them, is going to improve the experience of the employee and what an employee is capable of. Those things are all incredibly real. And all that we have to do is translate that into what does that mean for the person? So what does that mean for the individual employee who, most people, Tim, and I know me and you are fairly fortunate, we wake up and kind of manage our own business every day. A lot of people wake up every day and don't enjoy the job they do today because it is slow, it is frustrating, it is dependent on lots of other people feeding stuff into them that takes time, and there's all that aggravation. Actually, those people would be much happier in their day-to-day if a lot of that manual work was taken away from them and they were able to be more creative with the way they do work, be more influential in the way they do work. I think finance teams are an unbelievable example of this. There's such a big narrative around finance teams, processes being automated and then being worried about that replacing them. Actually, you should just get the boring, arduous stuff automated so that then you can change and be more influential, have better storytelling skills, have more commercial acumen so you can help people make decisions. And I think it's that we've got to communicate to both businesses and to people, because yeah, it's a pretty miserable message. AI is going to replace lots of people. That's not a wonderful idea. Actually, how do we empower the business to do business better, and how do we empower the people to be part of that?
Yeah, I really I like that example from the finance world, because so many CFOs or financial directors I've met are brilliant, and they've got brilliant business minds, really strategic minds. But you only really see that when they are at that level, because they've got the freedom, because then they've got all the people below them to be able to do all of the number crunching, for one of a more technical phrase. But I suppose that is something which those more junior finance professionals with their qualifications can actually start to do more, because then they can push
100%.
off the work, which is the repetitive, boring stuff, onto AI powered tools, and allows them to add value more strategically from an earlier period. So actually what you're doing is, if you get this right, you're bringing in the value, the expertise, the knowledge of all of your staff, allowing them to feed that into the benefit of the company, so the company's more successful, but also you're making those individuals at all levels of the organization feel more fulfilled, so they're more likely to stay in your organization. So it really is a win-win.
Absolutely. Like, people are obsessed with the ROI of everything, but and they should be. And I'm a big believer that if you're going to spend money, it should make your business make more money or save more money, right? That's the way that good business operates. But actually, there's a really nice metric that I think we have to be considering, not only for data and AI literacy, but actually AI investment generally. And that is the return on employee metric, which allows you to analyze a lot of the kind of less tangible, less kind of feel it, taste it, measure it on a spreadsheet type benefits for employees. And return on employee is something that we invest a lot of time measuring. We actually have a business unit in Data and AI Literacy Academy that is focused purely on evidencing clear ROI and clear ROE from our programs, so that we can look a CFO in the eye and say, look, it's helped you here on the spreadsheet, and it's helped you here in a people retention, people experience perspective. And that return on employee shouldn't be overlooked when it comes to either literacy or AI generally, actually, because it should make people want to stay where they are, and that has the cost benefit as well.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much value there from what you've been doing very much at the front line of driving this AI transformation. I mean, you know, as UK AI, we talk around the importance of skills every day, but actually you're delivering it every day, going out there with thousands of, well, tens of thousands of employees around the country delivering it. So just as we start to wrap things up, I wanted to ask you, as we look forward to the next 6 months, what are the challenges and the opportunities that that you're thinking about the most when it comes to this area of skills and transformation?
Yeah, I mean, one of our things that one of our challenges has always been that actually, to do these things well, you have to do them in a very intentional, quite kind of like intensive, detailed way. Like I've mentioned, with the change management, the change in the processes, the big comms plans, etc. The more people you need to hit and the more people you need to engage and educate, the harder that gets. And I think the dawn of AI has meant that the scale requirement is so much bigger than it was with data now, with data literacy. At least in the short term, it's a much faster desire to get to scale. So that's one of the things that actually we've been solving for about the last 12 months, and I think we're there or thereabouts now, where we can really deliver. Either if somebody only wants 500 people educated in a year, that's one thing. But actually now, if they want 50,000, we can also solve that problem and hopefully do it in a way that doesn't feel miserable to the employee. I think one of the things that we always contend with is that ultimately you can't live educate that many people. Like, you can't meaningfully live educate 50,000 people. You've got to give them some sort of self-service opportunity. And e-learning or self-paced learning has a terrible reputation because mandatory learning is often built horribly. And that isn't what we believe in. We believe that if you are going to give people self-paced learning that they can do in their own time, they can do at their own desktop or their phone, it better be good too, and it better really speak to their job role. And a lot of the data we've got suggests that actually people are incredibly happy, even if it's made mandatory to do our learning, which is probably one of the nicest things I've heard about anything we do, if I'm honest, that people who've had mandatory training think, do you know what, this is actually much better than mandatory training I've been given before, and that's made me think about it differently. So that's great. But yeah, the scale requirement with AI literacy is high, and we're out there addressing that across some really big enterprises now, which is exciting.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And I was going to say, you know, how can we stay in touch and find out more about what you're doing at the Data and AI Literacy Academy? You've told us a little bit already, but you know, if people want to sort of come along and find out more about your courses or some of the programs you're running, where should they go?
So firstly, my name's Greg Freeman, and I am on LinkedIn, and I am possibly too present for a lot of people on LinkedIn, but like happy to connect to anybody who's listening. But you can also go to www.dl-academy.com. There is a book free consultation button on the website if this is something you are thinking about. What I will say is, we are not a consultancy, and therefore like a lot of the work we do to help you shape the way that you should think about the space, the way that you might design a program with your business, etc., we actually do for free. And it's one of the things that I think people see a lot of value in for us, because we help them do a lot of what would be consultative thinking if it wasn't us doing it. So if you just want a good conversation about it, and it's something that you are thinking about, how do we do this in the next kind of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whether you're a CDO, CDAIO, or you're actually a CEO, COO, CFO who wants really to drive it through operations or through finance, we're happy to have some really deep conversations before you've spent a penny. So feel free to put a request in via the website.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a really smart way of being able to engage with those leaders and get them in and help set some of those, address some of those challenges. And then with all of this experience that you've been telling us and bringing to life over the last half an hour, that can really add a lot of value to businesses on the start of that transformation. Amazing. So, Greg, I've really enjoyed the conversation today. We've touched upon a lot of areas. I think going from the concept of what is literacy, and you really helped us to understand what that is and what that isn't, and why it's so important to building the confidence and trust across the organization. And then we've looked at the organizational change as well, and the role of leaders, the role of managers, the role of employees, and how we sort of bring them on the journey. But it's important to remember also that journey is not just a one-off. It is a journey. It is a continual process, and organizations need to treat it as such, and ensure that they're sort of investing in their people, but also the partners like Data and AI Literacy Academy to be able to go on that journey successfully. So a lot of value added. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Not at all. Thank you for having me.